go. Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to the show. It's great to have you all on here again. I've spoken to each and every one of you individually, and now you're all together, so this is splendid. I'm really excited to do this with you today. We have here Sacha Stone from the New Earth Project, World Health Sovereignty Summit, and humatat.org. And we also have John Paul Rice, independent filmmaker straight out of Hollywood, speaking out avidly about satanic ritual abuse. And we have Pastor Henry Hildebrandt here from the Church of God in Aylmer, Ontario, who has been fighting tirelessly for the Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, as well as the Constitution. So welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to have you here. So I have 4 questions for you, and if we could answer 10 minutes or less, that'll be great. It'll be my job to jump in and maybe redirect. First question, can we start with you? Kick off with you, Sacha Stone? Is that okay with you?
Surely.
Surely. Okay, so what can you tell our audience about why what we're experiencing right now is about tyranny and not about healthcare?
Because it takes only 2 or 3 neural synapses firing in a sentient brain to work it out by now. It doesn't take much to be able to look at the orchestration of witchery that's gone on subsequent to the gravest fraud ever perpetrated against the peoples of the world. I say the greatest fraud. There have been cataclysms in the past. There have been appalling sort of axiomatic moments in our civilizational history, which have brought about the deaths of millions and millions, tens of millions of souls. There have been terrible calamities that have befallen us as a species. But there's never been such a systemic orchestration of evil, in my view, as we're witnessing right now. But I also suggest that it's a good thing because it does demarcate the line in the sand, and if one understands the mathematics of nature, natural law is subject to fractality. Fractality is subject to Mandelbrottian mathematics and Fibonacci ratios and all of that clever stuff. And we can see that same metric playing out in the social ecology and the economic landscape and political landscape in the world and cultural landscapes. And all of that math is demonstrating to us palpably that we're seeing a bifurcation, an alchemization process happening. The end of evil empire, in simple terms, is what we are witnessing the early onset of. And that's a profoundly positive and good thing. And I will say that it's also a demonstrable of the hand of the divine working through the utility of evil, which is government to this day, which I regard as the extension of the Catholic Church essentially, and the witchery of monotheistic religion, where it was taken to where it ought not to have gone with the Christed message. But that's what we've ended up with. That's where we're at. We've clearly invoked and conjured that at the collective soul level. It's covenanted. And here we are. The question is, are we able to awaken within the dream spell? And to what extent are we able to surf the euphoria of the awakening? For me, it's actually all good news, to be blunt.
Beautiful. Thank you, Sacha. John, how about you? Same question. How can you, or what is it you can say to our audience that makes this about tyranny and not about healthcare, what we're experiencing right now?
Yeah. I've been looking at this from different levels and dimensions through my own lived experience, which, if your audience knows, we've done an interview together, talk about my own childhood trauma in relation to the world and how it plays out. So I see this as there's a feature of this time that I think is inherent in the leadership of the world, which ties into their psychopathy and sociopathy, and that is narcissism. It's the crux of this entire time. Our own narcissism plays a major part in the collective unconsciousness that creates this world. Having external illusions that we hold on to, whether I'm just using examples, whether it be Trump or a politician or a leader or a movement, it is our identity that we're pushing into these figures that have been
pre-programmed into us over a long period of time. And now having that illusion shattered for 4 years with Donald Trump, and at a global level, everything that came before it in a pre-revolutionary period where there was discontent. What we are having to face down, in my view, and this is kind of why I agree with Sacha in this case, is that if we are to change our consciousness, our conscious state, away from tyranny, which is oppression and its submission and obedience, and that's the good side of it. The fact of the matter is that we have to look at our own dark side. We have to look at everything that came before this moment, in each of our own individual lives and collectively helped create this world. And if we are able to learn the lessons of what created this situation that we're currently living in and watching, we can do our own inner work to look at those things and try and heal them through unconditional love, because the narcissist thrives in a world that is devoid of love. The narcissist can impose their will on people who are seeking love. And when we're seeking it outside of ourselves, we're giving our authority and our autonomy away into other people to do the work for us. In fact, is the opposite of what we should do. And yet, at the same time, it is the biggest conflict and battle that we have going on in the world, because people are trying to live free and they're trying to define freedom in a time where they've been surrounded by tyranny all this time under the illusion of freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John Paul. Great, great. Pastor Henry Hildebrandt, same question. How can you let our audience know this is about tyranny and not about healthcare?
When we look at the effects that this lockdown is having, it is very easy to see and understand that there's something very wrong with what we're doing, because we see, for example, we see suicide rates spiking, a drug overdose. Why are we not hearing? They talk about it a little bit, but not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. It is there's something wrong when the cure that we're claiming to be having the cure for it, when the cure is way, way worse than the problem itself. I heard yesterday someone says this is an out of control pandemic. Well, I'll be direct. The out of control pandemic here is not the virus. It is the way we're going about to take care of this virus, or wanting to take care of it, by putting people out of work. Of course, I'm a pastor. I'm concerned about the churches, but not just that. The people, the public in general is affected in such a horrible, horrible way that there's just no way that we can justify the means that how we're going about this when we see the effects of it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, 100%. Great answers, guys. Thank you for that. I'm wondering if you can describe an experience of tyranny that each of you have had, and since the lockdown, since last March, and if there isn't one that's fairly intense, even just being confronted in a store about a mask, anything that you've experienced, and can you describe a little bit about it? So can we start with you, John?
Well, I experienced firsthand the censorship of our movie off of Amazon with no provocation, and it was right as the time that Wayfair and Virginia Guffrey's testimony was being released, and there was a rise and an uptick in the searches for human trafficking, and there was a rise and an uptick in our film Organically. I have watched people, it's kind of actually piggybacking off of what Henry said. You have doctors on television prescribing these lockdowns, these masks, these mandates, this isolation, and what he was talking about statistically, the net effect of all of those policies has resulted in higher rates of suicide, drug overdoses, addiction, depression, child abuse, domestic violence. You go down the list: starvation, homelessness, financial disaster. 500 to 800 million people have now moved into poverty over the last year. And these other people have made trillions of dollars. the reality of what we're faced with is the human carnage, the wreckage from these policies. And nobody is getting up there and talking about to 330 million Americans how they can take regular vitamin C, vitamin D, eat a healthy diet, get rest and exercise to boost their immune systems. So this is what I'm looking at. Everything is the enclosure of a state voice coming in. So when censorship ends, when you follow it to its logical conclusion, there is only one voice left, and that's the state. And we should not think of it as just censorship online, but censorship in extinguishing the human spirit as a whole. And they will do it through every means and levers possible. So if it's erasing history, if it's taking out truthful information, if it is imposing your will on somebody and submitting or resisting, you're giving energy to it. And it's creating a tyrannical machine. It's giving it life, giving it more power, giving it more effect, giving it an amplified voice. And so when I went through this process, I saw all of the signs in making my film. But the ultimate kind of the exclamation point was when I started seeing my film and other people's films being targeted, who were pointing out truthful information, and there was no debate on any of it. It just had to be out. It had to be gone. It had to be censored, and it had to be labeled away. So those are the things that I've experienced at this time, but I've seen the mental and emotional toll on all of my friends from all sides of the political spectrum. It's not just in politics, but just all sides of life, being pulled down and separated from each other. It's almost like it's taken our love and care and all the things that are intrinsically human about us, as we can observe in children alone. And look at what they've done to our children. They have isolated our children. They have taken away their play. I've seen in my friend's granddaughter how she longs to be with her friends and can't understand why she has to be separate. This is having long-term effects on the development of our children, which is not to say that all is lost, but the response to this time is really the fundamental issue. How will we respond, not uniformly and collectively, but individually, and individually then rebuilding those communities within our hearts, within ourselves, as opposed to looking outside for others to do it for us or to create that environment like we're waiting on a savior to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Really well said, John Paul. Henry, would it be okay if I showed a clip of one incident that you have actually experienced publicly, and then you can either talk more about it, or you can share a different experience with your time? Would you be okay with that? Okay, so everybody hang tight. You may disappear and just see the clip, but you'll be back. This clip is probably about 3 minutes long. And the sound is the best I can do, so you may have to listen pretty closely, but I'll boost the sound after the video. So just hang tight. Here we go. Okay.
On Jesus' name, on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand. One more time. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but wholly lean on Jesus' name, on Christ the solid rock I stand, all other ground is sinking sand, all other ground is sinking sand.
Think about your soul. Think about one day we will be in eternity.
Don't
think about it. Are you doing this because you have to? Do you not feel God dealing with your soul? Go ahead, officer.
Pastor Hildebrandt, this is a summons here for the Church of God, alleging on the 27th of December, 2020.
Hold on just a bit. Are you talking about the Church of God? Because we know it's not the building.
The church, the corporation, the organization.
No, sir. That's not the church. The church is the people. That's why they're here. This is the church. Do you understand? Sir, do you understand? You're charging all these people. You're charging all these people, not the building.
It's the church.
Which is the church? Can you tell us?
The organization.
No, sir. What is the church? You point to the church. Officer, help him. Point to the church. Which is the church, sir? Point to the church.
The building?
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. That's where you're mistaken. That's where you're mistaken. You're fighting against God. The people, this is the church. This is the church. I'm only a part of it. I'm their leader. This is the church. Can you point to them and say you're charging them?
How to read that in Canada.
Do that. Point to them, say you're charging the people.
This is here. This is for the court date of February 11th, 2021 at 480 Sunset Drive in St. Thomas at the Provincial Offences Court. Okay, sir? It's alleging the 10.1 sub 1 of the Reopening Ontario Act, host an event exceeding the number permitted under the that 10.1.
Going against the Constitution.
Sir?
Are you going against the Constitution?
I'm here. I'm the court officer.
First of all, please identify yourself first and last name, please, and from which?
My Special Constable Jeffrey, Elmer Police.
What's the last name?
Jamie is my first name. Jeffrey is my last name.
Jamie Jeffrey?
Yes.
Jamie Jeffrey from the Elmer Police?
Yes.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So this here, the summons, is like I said, for the offense of the 10.1 sub 1 of the Reopening Ontario Act, host an event exceeding the number permitted under the continued section 7.02 order.
Did we transgress the Constitution?
I'm here to give you this for the.
What is this? What is
this? This is a summons
For what?
for the Provincial Offences Act.
Did we do anything against the Constitution?
I'm not talking about the Constitution.
I'm talking about the Constitution, sir.
I'm here.
I said, did we do anything against the Constitution, which guarantees us the freedom of religion, the freedom of gathering? Anything against it? Please answer me.
That's right.
Please answer me. Did we do anything against the Constitution?
This is not. This is with the Reopening Ontario Act. Sir.
What's the Reopening Ontario Act? Does it stand or the Constitution? Do we have religious freedom or do we not?
Right. I'm here to serve you the piece of paper. I'm not here to get into.
Have you thought about what you're doing? Have you listened to God, what He's telling you? Are you thinking about the oath that you have sworn? You said you would protect the Constitution, and you said you would protect the When will you do that?
That's right.
When will you do that? Officer, please join us. When will you do that?
Take the piece of paper.
I'm not obligated to take the piece of paper.
This is your opportunity to explain in court and give your defense. Okay?
I don't want to.
I'm not the court.
I have nothing to explain. I have the Bible. I have the Constitution. I have done nothing wrong. Absolutely nothing wrong.
Right, that's right.
When will you recognize? When will you recognize that you're dealing with God, not with man? When will you recognize that?
That's right. Well, God's not giving us the problems right now. You are, okay?
Because God is not here in person, and I am. Thank you, sir.
Right. So you tell the judge.
No, sir.
That's yours.
Okay.
So just videotape that down there. That's where it landed.
You know where it is. That's your court date. Is that
littering? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's littering.
Think about what you're doing.
That's littering.
Littering the property.
All around my soul is great. He then is all my hope and stay. On Christ the Son.
Okay. So that's a real life example of what's going on in Canada. Pastor Hildebrandt, if you want to talk more about that, you can. I know you have so many examples of tyranny yourself right now in Canada. So the floor is yours for the next 10 minutes, whatever any of those that you want to talk about.
I won't take long, but I just wanted to, of course, to relive this brought back memories again, how time after time after time, how they directly interfered and did things that they should have never done. Of course, looking at the section 176 of the criminal code and on and on and on. I guess what stands out in my mind right now that I would feel like would be the biggest tyranny is when the week before last week, they showed up at the oldest member of the congregation here, 85-year-old a widow who is a war veteran. She survived the Second World War, born in Poland, and just fled from country to country trying to, and came to Canada, and was so extremely happy to have made it. When the police showed up at her door, I could not believe that we would have ever seen that this lady, before she passes away at the age of 85, would experience this in Canada, where the officer walks up to her door and hands her a ticket for attending a church service. I was talking to the officers even, and I told them, I said, it is so, in my view, it is so brutal the way it went about. In my view, I think the officer should have, when he walked up the door and she opened the door and he sees it's an 85-year-old, he could have assumed instantly that she's a war veteran. He should have just instantly said, ma'am, you will not receive a ticket. I came here to give you a ticket, but that has changed as soon as I see you. Can I bring you some grocery? Could I shovel your driveway? Could I get the snow off of there? What else can I do? And I want to personally thank you for your service, for your sacrifice you made for our freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution, and on and on. I feel like he should have done just a respectful speech there. And if he wanted to, at the end, he could say that I was sent here. I'm supposed to do my job. If you attend a church service, that you might get fined, but you will absolutely not get fined today. And again, I thank you for your service, for your sacrifice. That to me was just, it just was too much. Okay, I'm younger, I can take things. I'm a leader, I'm a pastor, so I expect to accept slander. I expect to have opposition. But to show up at the door of an 85-year-old war veteran, to me, it's just too much. It's just too much. And then when the officer said later on, when we told him, how could you have done it? He said, I love my job. I'm glad I did what I did. To me, it's just beyond. I would expect a resignation from the officer. I would expect a public apology from the police force to say we have gone very, very wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just one of the incidents. There's been many incidents where you have received tickets yourself right at your home, at your door. And all of the congregation received tickets, I believe.
Yes, they went door to door, handed them out. Just this morning, just 10 minutes before I got on here with you,
We lost your sound, Henry. Henry, we lost your sound. We'll give Henry a couple of minutes and then I'll get you to jump in, Sasha.
Yeah, Henry's now muted. So try again, Henry.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
No, he's not on mute. He's unmuted.
Oh.
But what you may need to do is jump out of the room and jump back in again. This has been happening I do interviews throughout the day, and lately this has been happening on Zoom for me. So yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Very good.
There we go. So maybe before Henry comes back in, we can go back to him. Sasha, for you, any incidents of tyranny? I know you live in beautiful Bali on Indonesia, and I'm wondering how you could experience tyranny there, but I'm sure you probably have a story or two.
No, I don't experience any tyranny in Indonesia. And I'm sure it's out there. It certainly wouldn't be stupid enough or brave enough to come knocking on my door here, frankly. But having said that, I know that the tyranny that I want to speak to is not the explicit tyranny of the moronic class of salamander that find themselves hiding behind the seals of office and badges of office and costumes, like these moronic imbeciles, these police or masquerading individuals masquerading as police that the pastor had to deal with there in that remarkable clip. I'm not talking about that salamander class of subhuman because they're almost not worthy of attention. I'm talking about the tyranny not that comes knocking on the door wielding injections or tasers. I'm talking about the tyranny of our own ignorance. which has led us systemically to this point. And I think that's what John Paul was very adroitly speaking to earlier. And I agree. I think that's the essential theme that we need to acknowledge and address before there is any redemption or absolution from what is clearly the conjuring of our own collective unconscious coming back to meet us squarely in the perfect geometry of now. And again, as I said earlier, the divine hand is behind all of the witchery and bedevilment, because we have to detox. We have to detox civilizational traumas. We have to detox 500 years of imperial hegemony and blood sports issuing out of the Catholic Church and the crowns of Europe subsequent to the massacre, the plunder, the rape, and the desecration of all of the black skin, brown skin, red skin, and yellow skin people of the world. And I would throw the white skins in there now as well. By the laws of karma, we're now getting it back squarely. But the point is that until we address that collective unconscious patterns of imperfection, we are not going to see remedy or redemption or absolution. And we're sure as hell not going to see the satanic Luciferic construct called government standing down or stepping to the side, because it doesn't do that. It cannot do that. It can only enter into dissolution by virtue of absolution. And absolution is an actualized consciousness state where we do that actualized conscious absolving of the status quo. We cast our light, our plasma projection toward that as a collective. We call it morphogenesis, whatever. But the point is that has to be a godly act. And when we do that, and we're beginning, you can see it starting, and it's starting in different pockets around the world. People are beginning to acknowledge the awakening within the dream spell. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And that's the true reckoning. The reckoning is with the tyranny of our own unconsciousness and our own abnegation of conscience. A classic example being those salamanders in costume that the poor pastor was dealing with, who the fact that they all looked like farm animals is, and I'm not being rude deliberately, I'm saying it because to be very blunt about it, I know too much, having made films with chiefs of police, having met with multiple. Just last week, I took testimony from the highest ranking United Kingdom Police and Crime Commissioner for 2.5 hours, hearing about the travesty of the status quo in England, in this case, the Cronus Central. But the point I'm making about farm animals in costumes is that these creatures have almost been genetically bred by now into being this line that stands between the living and the dead. And we mustn't be too empathic and compassionate towards these creatures in the same way that a very obstinate creature that is bearing down upon your children and about to trample them to death, you want to either take a very large stick to the creature or you want to shoot it in the head. And you need not be too sanctimonious about that process. I don't have any regard for people masquerading as living beings who are as infracting against an 85-year-old woman, as the pastor said. These are grave, grave crimes at the level of the soul covenant. They are unconscionable and incalculable in the suffrage that they bring about. And it must be you and I that follow the good example of the pastor there. He was a little too polite for my liking, but that one would expect that from a man of the cloth. I certainly wouldn't have been nearly as polite, but thank God for people with that courage and conviction. The tyranny that we're dealing with is the collective unconscious, and more than the collective unconscious, the tyranny is my own abnegated and surrendered aspects of self that are hitherto unresolved. And I must now take this extraordinarily divinely appointed hour to resolve those aspects within self. And that's stepping into so-called Christed nature, supernature.
Lovely, beautiful. I love that. How we have to take, that's everything we see on the outside is just giving us the opportunity to do that. And beautifully said, Sacha. Always love the poetry of your words. Sometimes I get completely lost, but always love the depth of how you explain all of the wisdom that you give throughout all of these podcasts. And we're all on the same page with that for sure. And I think we have lost Pastor Hildebrandt, and I think he's probably just having a hard time getting back on, but he hasn't been able to arrive. So we'll just carry on. Any thoughts, John, about that clip that we just saw, and just what it's an example, I guess, because as far as I know, neither of you are in Canada. So just an example of what's going on here in Canada. Just any of your thoughts on that?
Well, I have several, I shouldn't say several, I'd say like 3 or 4 really close friends in Canada in different parts. And I talk to them weekly and daily. And most people in the world have no idea the tyranny that's raining down in Canada. I didn't even know about it until I learned about it this summer.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I see people like that gentleman there and his officer with him, I agree with Sacha in many ways, that because he does know a heck of a lot more than most. But when you see how these things play out over time and space, the way that the system, the people who inhabit the system view us as we are vessels for their message and their program. So they have to do everything that they can as a precondition to turn us away from our true self, our true essence. That begins, as Ronald Bernard talked about, and I've spoken about, through child abuse, because the lack of love leaves a void open in someone to seek love as a child, but seek it in authority or seek it in purpose and meaning. And if you did not have that love, if you were neglected as a child, say by your mother and father, if you were lucky to have both, you are seeking it outside of yourself through accomplishments, achievements, status, authority, power. This is all in the Gulag Archipelago. It's been all throughout history. It is a collective unconsciousness. It's our own darkness, basically, that we have yet to face down and really heal it, not attack it, not resist it, not attach ourselves to it. In fact, I tell people, it's like the best way that you can look at this from the outside looking in is to detach yourself, to look at every opportunity of things that you are emotionally tied to that you cannot control, you have no control over, is to begin to at least let go of it, or the conscious attempt to let go of that illusion for which you're playing in, which gives energy to the matrix. It reinforces it. So on a microcosmic level, you know, you see somebody like AOC and she says something very narcissistic or outrageous or very stupid. The time, energy, and effort that one would put in to pointing that out, debating it, it's like giving yourself a dopamine hit on negativity, rather than learning to how you can transmute that into something that is positive, which is what you can do in your own life, how you can make your life more beautiful, to create space. It's really what it is. It's creating space in the mind that allows you to build a world that invites more space to come into it. Whereas if we keep to ourselves, we comply, we do all of these different things, we're just going along the structure of what they want for us. And it will end in our death. It really, truly will. It will not stop killing itself. If one thing that I've said to people, when I've said it in your interview that we've done together, is what we do to our own children, we do to ourselves and each other. But what these people, and conversely, this is the cycle of abuse. What these people do to their own children, they do to each and every single one of us by the effect of their very being, not necessarily through conscious evil, but just by the effect of their own being. And that is the part where we have to face it within ourselves, is what are we creating from our own minds and our own feelings, and where we can go with that. And what Sacha and I have personally experienced relaxing into God, relaxing into that power, which is beyond me, for which I don't have words to describe how to get to it, but it is a process of humility and humbleness, and not submission, but actually embracing the true divine love that you were born as a child. That's what we all came in here as. All 7.9 billion of us on this world, when we were infants, had that divine intrinsic beauty before all the problems began. And that's where God wants us to be. God wants us to be in that place of creation. God wants us to be in that place where our heart and our manifestation of creation is coming from within the heart, as opposed to a reaction to the world, in response to the world. So I see what happened to Father and his parishioners, and I look at those men and I look at the whole thing and I say, there it is, right there. Two worlds, two completely different worlds. One of obedience and one of rejection of authority and submission to a higher power that actually is freeing at the same time, but is not part of that reality. It's not part of that world. It's beyond what one can see, but one knows and feels for themselves and is connected to and given power that is derived from within and beyond. So I hope that more examples of what Father does and more of these people begin to come together, because it will show a very clear and dividing line to many people. It's like, no, guy, this is where they stand on everything. And they are never going to let you get your humanity back until you take that authority back within yourself and begin to create it in the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can definitely see the divide. And it's really interesting how when they approached and when Pastor Hildebrandt started talking to him, you could see their power. You could see the power of the officer declining. And you could see the power of, that higher authority coming through. And it's so courageous, Pastor Hildebrandt. So courageous that I'm sure you have fear at times too, but you stand in it. You stand in it. I mean, that's what courage is, right? It's not that you're not afraid, or maybe you're not afraid, but it's standing in the fear, even if you're afraid of it, right? And I've seen you do that countless times. And so we were just talking a little bit about your experience there. That's all you really missed when you were gone. And you can watch this back. Yeah, you can watch it again after and see what the comments were. So let's move on to the next question. It's just that what we've heard is that what's happening in the world today, and both Sacha, you and both John have touched on this, that this is, and you haven't used this word, biblical. So we hear that a lot. What we're experiencing right now is biblical. Can you speak in your own words about what that means to you, what you see playing out, how that's biblical, how that it's historical, if you want, or how that relates to scripture in some way or another? And maybe we could start with you, Pastor Hildebrandt.
You're saying what we're seeing today, how that relates to scripture, or what we're experiencing? Yes, I definitely believe that. Of course, I would say my foundation, as you know, my foundation is the Word of God. And yes. I say that, yes, we see what is happening around us, but definitely, we look in the scriptures and we see that, well, I would put it like this: prophecy bears it out that before the end is here, things that we will see, and I believe that we are seeing. I also believe, and this is a very encouraging part in the middle of all of this, that, well, I first of all, I know that God is the winner, and that He is Alpha and Omega. He has the first word and He has the last word. I know that God will get Himself glory through this, as hard as it is for us to go through this. But according to the Word of God, He will get Himself glory through this, where we will see that He will use this, which He already is doing at this particular time. I clearly see it, where He is gathering His people worldwide, Christians from all over the world. He's gathering them. We're standing together like never before. We feel more united than we did before. It's waking up Christians all across this world, and not just Christians, but I'm specifically speaking about the Christians. I feel like that this is what we find in Scripture. This is what we see, what prophecy tells us what will be happening. So to me, it's hard to go through this, but it's also very encouraging to see the positive side of what will become of this. For example, the people that come attend our services like never before. We have visitors like never before. And I'm saying people brokenhearted and wanting to know, how can I change my life? What must I do? That part is very encouraging.
Yeah, wow. Wow. And for Sacha and for John, Pastor Henry Hildebrandt doesn't live that far away from where I do, probably 2 hours. So I kind of know what's going on. He holds his church services in the parking lot and has done that since March to keep the separation. And he's had a few police officers line up on the side of the road and watch the service once in a while. I don't think they participate, but they keep an eye on things. Thank you for that. John, how do you see what's happening in the world today as related to the Bible, as related to scripture, or even history?
So I think I can't speak for the other people, Sacha and Father, but I came into this completely unaware, right? 4 years ago, I was terrified at the election of Donald Trump, because I had bought the cognitive dissonance and was also part of the cognitive dissonance in myself, my own contradictions. So when I see all of this playing out, I contemplate, for 4 years, I contemplate the horrors of the world for a solid 2 years, 2017 to 2018. And I end up coming back to myself and my own childhood and my parents and my abuse and being in a hospital at 8 and wanting to kill myself. And when I'm seeing all of these things unfold in the drama of the world in relation to what's going on, it's almost like last week I was watching like the Imperial Star Destroyer just pass through this big collective satanic world moving in front of me that I've always lived in, but I'm seeing through new eyes for the first time. And it gave me a place no longer of anger, but of compassion, because I too was there. I too would, and it's not a shame and guilt place. This is the thing. So I looked at it, and I'm looking at all of this manifest, and I've been reading scripture, and I've been reading the Gospels, and all throughout this time, I'm growing more and more stronger and more, quote, to the outside world, more courageous. But it's really just by the effect of my own being. So what I am seeing on the universal level, in terms of biblical and otherwise, is the rise of idols, the rise of cults, the rise of Satan, being like the mask coming off for a lot of people, way more than, and it's always been here. That's the thing. It's energetically, we never saw it and believed in its merits, so we didn't pay attention to it, but it's always been here with us. The only difference is that as things unfold, everything evolves and it changes and it becomes more true and more pure of itself. And in a way, it's provoking the light to rise in people. I mean, people like me, who were, I got out of the Catholic Church at 17, 16 years old because of all the crap going on there that I knew when I was a teenager and my own personal experience. But I always held on to Jesus in some way without being, quote, religious or even a follower. And it came full circle for me. So if there's anything that I could say to people in this time, for all of our ignorances, for all the things that you don't understand, I have found that aligning myself with that which Christ is, with Jesus, as a structure, an essence that has endured for 2,000 plus years, that is the one thing that can buttress you against all the hell. So as imperfect and as ignorant as you are, you have this thing to guide you and live by as best and as ignorant as you can. And it will save you from the world. It will save your mind. It will save your body. I am not one to say to people what is and is not, but I can tell you, as somebody who came from all the hell and the filth that I was in, not only 19 years in Hollywood, but that I had endured prior to Hollywood, which then unfolded, that child abuse system unfolded in front of me for 19 years, and I began to see it in myself, and I began to see it in other people. Jesus was the only way that I knew solidly in a spiritual world that I could align myself with that essence and be able to endure all of the terrors and the horrors of the world, because I had a place to go, that I could go, that he always loved me. He always loved me no matter what I had been through and what I had done to myself. That was the key.
Yeah.
It was in spite of all that I had done that I found a compassionate being and a creator and an essence within my own heart. That was the truth, the unconditional love that I felt in my heart, where I did not have hatred, where I did not have to go and strike out at my enemy, and I did not have to have an idea of them and a construct mentally and emotionally in my head, but that I could first distance myself, become aware and in touch with who I was, and then I could have a better understanding in the relation of the whole world. And at the essence of that was that the child that we were all born as, arose. And it arose in people who, when I approached them with my father when he died, the man that raped me, the man that was an alcoholic and who had left me at 4 years old, I was able to love him unconditionally. That was not something that I planned. That was not something that I willed into action so much as it is that I trusted in my faith to bring me to that moment with him. And it was proven by the fact that I saw the love and the child come out of him with all the bitterness and resentment that he had. So in the context of all of this time, I have found God and I have found Jesus, and I continue to seek that essence and that power, because it is the only thing, not out of ignorance, that gives me clear results that I can see happening in my own life, and the transformation that I am going through, and the people that I am bringing along, not by belief, but by doing. Prayer and meditation is fantastic, but we must go out and do. We are spirit and matter. We are here on this battlefield, if you want to look at it that way, where there is a competing world that is designed to pull you all away from what you are completely.
Yeah.
It's to give you every pleasure and indulgence that you can possibly have that's impulsive and yet has no long-term meaning to it. It's an idol worship system, right? It's icons and idols. But at that fundamental level, I found the peace within myself that I could not find anywhere else in the world. So I think that's where we're, at least my own personal experience that I can observe for myself, that's where I feel that this has been shifting into a biblical time where we are seeing the rise of darkness and the rise of the light.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, beautifully said, John. Really feel for you and your story when you describe it. And isn't that what forgiveness is? When you were talking about your father, when you can see past what he's done and see who he is at the core, at the essence of who he is.
It was me looking at him as a child and going, no child would ever want to destroy themselves this way consciously, as I was destroying myself unconsciously. And when I could see that my suffering was also his suffering as a child, and that doesn't excuse him or take away the bad acts that he did, but in the power of what I relaxed into, I could do the work that he was not capable of doing. I decided that, at least in my whether God being I personally think God is speaking to us at all times and reaching out to us. That's why I like, what Sacha is saying about the darkness rising, this is the divine order. It has to be, because we have created it. People talk about, where I say, like, people waiting on a savior and praying to Jesus to come down and fix all of this. It's like, I saw this perfect meme last year where a guy's sitting on a park bench turning to Jesus sitting next to him and going, why do you allow poverty, starvation, suffering, all of these things? And Jesus turns to him and goes, funny you should ask. I was about to ask you the same thing. And it really is. It's it's us who's doing this to ourselves and each other.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I think that what coming from multidimensional places where these traumas exist, the spiritual realm, we can transcend those dimensions when we begin to do this, what we call the inner work. But start somewhere. Have some, even if you're starting with belief alone that you cannot perceive in your own life, that's something better than nothing. But it
Yeah.
must evolve into that knowing for yourself. And when you know it for yourself, then there is no truth that is higher, other than that there is the divine. But I'm saying the knowing for yourself gives you the greatest strength against all the lies of the world, so that you can continue to learn and not box yourself off, but you can actually go bigger. You can open up to a bigger world, and you can help create that bigger world that people can't see.
Amazing, amazing. And we will talk a little bit more about that. I like those ideas. So we'll talk a little bit more. I want to give Sacha a chance to talk about how he thinks that what we're going through right now emulates scripture in some way, or has risen the Christed light, or is history repeating itself. Sacha, take it away.
All of the above. I mean, I approach the scriptures with a certain, I'm very circumspect in approaching the scriptures. On the one hand, I cite and quote them a fair deal, especially lately. On the other hand, I also understand the diabolical aspect of gnosis and gospels and doctrine and creed. And the Bible is certainly not exempt from that, in my view. So I'm not a Christian. Well, I'm as much of a Christian as I am a pantheist or a Muslim. I'm very sort of egalitarian in my approach to religiosity. I love everything I hear coming out of the pastor Henry Hildebrandt, and everything I hear coming out of my brother John Paul. I work closely with the Bishop of Jerusalem, as you may know, Ria Abu al-Assal, who is one of my dearest friends, and we've been very close for many years, and we work closely on important work. I've got many people, friends who are men of cloth and women of the cloth, but I'm not a religious man. I'm very connected to the mystical traditions of things, and everything that I've heard come out of Pastor Henry is also absolutely connected to the mystical tradition and the Christed message, and not the artifice of religion. You see, my work in the last 20 odd years has been to do with redemption in a very pragmatic sense. I am the issue of liberal intellectual, fairly affluent, fairly privileged imperial colonial family in sub-Saharan Africa, growing up in a war there, and in that sense being privileged and living through apartheid, and then living through a heinous war, which robbed me of a great deal of innocence, and then being a refugee for 9 years after the war was over. So I've suffered in my life in ways that have not been kind. But the redemption I'm talking about is undoing of religiosity as it relates to the papal doctrines of discovery and dum diversus, which is the true travesty in our living memory. This was the white skins moving forward under papal canon and special dispensation to massacre and rape and plunder, as we mentioned earlier, all the First Nations of the world, subsequent to the early 15th century. 500 years of blood sports and imperial crown hegemony connected to the Vatican complex and the Catholic Church is a huge yoke to bear for good Christians today. Huge, huge. And it is the quanta of the innocence of the true Christed voices that are coming through now that I'm seeing and falling in love with again, going back to the message of Yeshua, as it should always have been. I regard the Vatican complex as the whore of Babylon, and I regard the crowns of Europe and the Anglo-American Corporation, the British East India Company, the Dutch East India Company, the Canadian corporation government, which is a heinous construct, the Commonwealth, all of the corporate fictions that have emerged subsequent to the monotheistic weaponization of Christianity since the Council of Nicaea in 325, 328 AD, and all that it's represented in almost 2,000 years, as I said, of blood sports. That is a yoke to bear, and we need to absolve and redeem ourselves as a peoples from within that thrall, because it is bedevilment, it is witchery, and there is a sort of fallen light of Atlantis, so to speak, still embracing the world. That is the archonic influence. That's the lower astral demonic interventionist element through which elements vicariously live through humanity, through demonic possessions. And I'm sure John Paul could speak a great deal to the mechanics of that. I certainly can. I've spent years taking the testimony from survivors and victims and investigators and criminologists and priests and all sorts. So that's very real stuff. And I'm just suggesting that that everything is epochal in that sense, everything is biblical, but it's all about the perfect geometry of now, which in my view is what the Christ message is in essence. And Pastor, not to keep banging the drum here, but the way that you dealt so beautifully with those imbeciles in costume, that to me is absolutely the enactment, the embodiment, and the manifestation of the Christed light. And that's completely defined. It's Daniel in the lion's den. It's walking through the valley of death and fearing no ill. It's also Ephesians, clad in the armor of God and going forth. You can be absolutely shitting yourself with fear. I've been in that position multiple times in the last 22 years. I've absolutely walked into the flame, and there have been guns and bullets flying. It's been very dark and very ugly in some of the work I've done. And yet, because I do correspond and cohere to that flame, the same flame that seizes John Paul in his conscious act of absolving his father from the most Saturnian crimes, and the same light that moves through the pastor in standing against the state and the crown, where it really matters. That is the preserve and the privilege and the prerogative of every single human being, be they Christian or non-Christian, as long as they are standing within that central sun of their own Christed or Christic nature. So I'm more universalist in my approach, but I love very much everything that I've heard today. And I would still repeat and sign off by saying, we have yet to resolve and absolve fully Canaanite ritualism, the pharaohs of Egypt, the Babylonian constructs, the Roman and Judean empires, and all that they did in the construct of the Vatican complex, the Templars, the Masonic traditions, the Khazarians, all of that stuff, the formation of the Illuminati and the formation of Switzerland. And then the issue of that into Novus Ordo Seclorum, which was 1776 United States of America Corporation. We are living in the most endemic and systemically architected, engineered, and constructed satanic hologram that is imaginable. And yet, here we are having this conversation, and we have already reached dry land, in my view.
Beautiful, Sacha. And we are all talking about that, whether we're talking about Christianity or we're talking about whatever sect we're talking about. It's clear to me that we're all here with that in that Christed light, because even the way Pastor Hildebrandt, you were acting in that scenario, was you were saying the church is not the building, church is not the corporation. This is the church. People are the church. These are the people who believe in this, who stand in this power, and that's the highest authority for you. So I agree with you, Sacha. I know that, religion over the years and the religious complex has been abhorrent in some of the things that have, come to light. And it is this light that is the church. It is this light that is the, as you say, Sacha, living people of the living soul. This is true humanity. This is what we are. We're light beings. We're light beings that get lighter and lighter and lighter, and that's our greatest power. I think personally, in this whole situation, which is going to lead me into the next question, which will be our last question, by the way, unless we want to hang around. Since we've been going through this and we've been talking about it a lot, and we've been, you know, trying to awaken people, there can be a lot of talk, a lot of talk, a lot of talk, a lot of talk. What can we do? So the question is, what are your thoughts, each of you, on what we can do individually to start progressing the collective away from this takeover human race? And we can start with you, Pastor Hildebrandt.
So I would say, and this question that you just asked has been asked by many, because people don't want to just know what's the situation that we're in. They want to know, how do we get out of this? Where do what brings tomorrow? What do we do? I hope this makes sense to all of you, but I think there's a difference between protesting something or defying something. And at the end of the day, even about this incident, the video that you saw, afterwards, I feel like, was I too disrespectful as a Christian? Should I have been more gentle? But I do not know, looking at the Bible, looking at the situation that we're in, I do not know that there is another way out of here than to defy. And I find myself again and again, even though people feel like I'm not doing it right, or I should be more gentle, they say maybe it should be done in a more godly manner, or whatever they say, right? I cannot please everybody. I found that out very, very fast. So I think we will have to defy, and not just in having church service, but I think we will have to defy the whole dark movement that's has come up on us. For example, I said in my sermon on Sunday, publicly, I said in my sermon, and it's basically incriminating myself, but I really don't care. I said, I have been seeing my family all through this, and I will continue to do so. It's one thing for me to say, people, it's not right that I cannot see my family, but it's quite another thing if you are seeing your family and claiming that and saying it publicly, that I will be. And I also said on Sunday in my sermon, I said, in the history, in the past 2,000 years, the children of God have always gathered, and they will continue to do so. I don't know how else we can gain this victory that we need to gain here than through defiance. And like I said, when you look at the protests that have taken place in Toronto, there was thousands of people there, thousands. I've spoken there numerous times, but it's not enough just to protest, because now you see they're handcuffing the protesters and they're hauling them away. But if we defy and we say, I will not do that. If it's one person saying it, it's one thing, but if we can have two, and 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16, and we go and it multiplies, like we see now through different things that are happening. I'm especially encouraged by seeing the Liberty Coalition forming, where these MLAs and MPs are stepping out, and former mayors, they're stepping out and they're saying, we're defying what is going on. I don't know how far that will go. I don't know what we will accomplish, but I think we will have to do it by defiance. And I'll close with this comment on my part. Like Daniel did, like the 3 Hebrews did, the 3 Hebrews could have knelt down with the rest of them and said, while they're all praying to that image, I'll pray to my God. And Daniel could have chosen a different window and said, okay, if they don't want me to pray at this window, I'll pray at another window. He said, no, it says, as aforetime, like he did before, we will do it again. The 3 Hebrews stood when everybody else knelt. And I feel like we need that. We need that spirit in us saying, no, I'm not going along with this. Well, you should be obeying, like Romans 13 says, you should be obeying the government. Well, Romans 13 verse 3 says that rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. And right now they are a terror to good works. So then that tells me that the rulers are wrong and that I can't obey them. So we can't just take one scripture and say, okay, Romans 13 says, obey the government. We can't obey the government, what they're doing, because it's against the Bible. Acts chapter 4 and 5 tells us, Peter and John, they said, we must obey God rather than man. anyway, I don't want to just keep on preaching here. I just want to share with you how I feel like the only way we can do it is by defiance. And I mean, in Jesus' name, defiance. Yesterday, somebody asked me, they said, Pastor, shouldn't you be more godly in this whole thing? And I said, well, let me tell you something. I said, John 3:16 is beautiful. God so loved the world. But John 2:16, Jesus kicks over the tables and the money flies all over the place. I said, right now I'm in John 2:16. And as soon as I get the 2:16, we'll go back to John 3:16.
I love it.
Yeah, that's great.
If you're going to selectively use the Bible, at least use it for a logical sense.
At least do it for a logical sense, you know.
I love
I
that.
love it.
That's
Verses for our
great.
times.
That's great. I totally agree with you. I'll just give a really quick personal experience I had going into a supermarket. I've had many, but this particular one, I went in and I didn't have a mask on, and as usual, and there was a doorman and he was standing there and he says, your mask. And I said, I'm sorry, I don't wear one. And he looked at me funny, just tight lip, stop talking, look straight forward, not give me the time of day. And I thought, okay, you've got the Christed light, you're a child of God, just keep walking, you're free to have right to life, you can breathe, all that kind of stuff. I'm talking to myself. And this guy's very, stiff. And then I had to go out of the grocery store and come back in front of him again. And I thought, oh no, I have to go back in front of him. I'll be super nice. So I'm like, bye, have a good day. And he's like, can you come here? And I said, yeah. And I thought, oh no. And I got up to him and he goes, why don't you wear a mask? And I was kind of, taken aback, because you don't have to answer why you don't wear a mask. But for some reason this day I said, well, I don't wear a mask because I'm a Christian, and Christians don't wear masks. I just said that, right? Because I didn't want to get into the whole satanic ritual. I mean, This guy's just a greeter at the door. And he said, I'm Christian or something. I'm Christian. I said, oh, you're Christian? I said, you could take your mask off, right? I was being kind of funny. And he said, no, how can I become a Christian?
Wow.
And that led to me giving this person some resources and things like that. Wow. It was really, really interesting, because I read this as this person shut down, wanted nothing to do with me, when they were probably self-reflecting about, wow, that person has freedom to just be themselves. How can I have that? And it was just really, really interesting. And so this person is now searching the Christed light as well. And this person is now searching for their own freedom. And I thought that was just interesting to throw in there.
Yes.
So, John Paul, same question. How do we move forward through this individually so that we can affect the collective through this takeover?
Mm-hmm. So just to kind of dovetail off of what you and Father said, is that every act of defiance is an opportunity for ourselves, both to reassert ourselves, not in our thought, but in our presence and our being and our faith, whatever that be. And I don't mean it in the religious sense. I mean it in the faith of the knowing for yourself, the truth, the way that you find to be at peace in this life, where you find divinity and holiness in this life, that holiness, not pious, but holiness of the full, the understanding of the full. We are creatures of imitation. You see that in children, how children can turn on a dime according to the attention, the kind of attention that's given to that child, and how it sparks life in a child. As an adult, we become more sophisticated in our ways. We build up many, many layers. We tell ourselves stories that create our reality in our mind. And what happens is, when those acts of defiance are followed, they're an opening inside of yourself for a new way of thinking, a true and honest expression. So when I look at all of these things and people ask me, well, what can I do? I mentioned earlier about the community. And community, a lot of times people think, well, so I've got these people that live around me and we're not together now. So somebody's got to organize it, right? Somebody's got to bring people together. And the true work that needs to be done is we need to bring ourselves together, put us in a very strong and loving place as much as we possibly can each day, because where you are, Ellie, in your strong and loving place affected that man who didn't know you, a stranger. And on the flip side of it, we're also hallucinating our projections of reality on people according to the program that we've been given, whether we're aware of it or not. We've all, I mean, we can define it as, you know, Marxist, satanic, whatever, but ultimately that energetic field affects our reality until we awaken from it. So what does that mean? It means that when you talk about community, it's a space that you create within yourself that gives you inner peace away from the world. And then that way you can create a place that invites people to come away from the world as the politics and the news and everything else. And we start to get to know each other. We start to ask each other questions. We start to draw more out of ourselves rather than our avatars or our label identification in the role that we play on the world stage, but more so in those quiet places where we actually live. So what I have been trying to do, and I tell people this too, this is the most powerful tool that you have, because it's the first instrument, it's the first weapon against lies, is telling the truth. Energy, frequency, and vibration. And that energy and frequency and vibration, by speaking your truth and living your truth in the real way that you live, which is not without pronouncements, without virtue. It's just, it's a place that you hold inside of yourself, and you continue, and it continually feeds and nourishes you and gives you insight on things that other people don't have. It's our intuition, right? As opposed to all of our decision-making skills from past experiences, but it's our intuition to move somewhere that takes us out of our comfort zone, however that might be. So when I look at these things and I say, okay, how do you attack this? It's multidimensional. But the first person that you have to get right with is yourself. Because if you want to learn about anything about this time on a microcosmic level, BLM and Antifa are energetic weapons that draw negative, violent energy towards them with righteousness. So the lesson to be learned in that is you can get lost in your righteousness of the injustices being done and go out and fight a war with people, but you'll end up becoming that war. You will, in the pursuit of taking down the quote system, you're in essence, you're fighting with yourself in a way. So my whole thing is that if you're going to be, let's say in my profession as a filmmaker, go build your own platforms. Get with people who live in the same or relatively the same reality as you, and even some that don't, but that are open to hearing, open to listening. Because again, if those people, like if you're looking at this as like, how do we save the world from the horrors, or how you have to go and build that world so that when those other people who are lost in it become refugees, they have dry land to go towards, rather than to be recaptured by the same satanic system as it's on life support going down. As I said to people, sociopaths and psychopaths have no self-remorse. That's why the crux of narcissism is there. They have no self-reflection. They cannot change. So the damage that they cause is monumental. And that plays out in the mind and the body. So if you are not in a position where you are strong, how can you help others who are as equally or worse off than you, who need your help, who need your care, who need your love, who need your ideas? So it's about, it really comes down to being a force of creation within, creating and building in a new direction that makes the old model obsolete, and then becomes self-evident to all those who are seeking help. Because I can tell you this, these people are extremely, extremely clever, and they are already starting up the spiritual cults in podcasts and with Hollywood, as they're going to move all of this BLM Antifa crap into the witchcraft, satanic worship, tarot card reading, all of it with the new age. And it's all without God, and it's all without Jesus. And it has to do with self-serving, narcissistic, materialistic needs. And those people are going to get They've already been abused terribly, but they're going to get even more abused and used as an agent of evil, unaware of that fact. So my invitation to people is create the world you want to live in, build it within yourself, and here's the crux of the whole thing. Make it for a world that follows natural law, that protects all life on this planet, starting from children that are not born to the born. Because we wait until they become 18 years old with a social security number before it matters. And by then it's too late, because they're either going to prison or they're going into the slave system. And that to me is, I mean, when I contemplate all of this, it can be overwhelming and it can make me terrified and angry and hateful. But then that means they won. That was the world I lived in. I hated the world. I was like Antifa. I was like BLM. I was on my way in that direction because I was so mad at what had been done to me as a child and how the outside world's trauma had helped remanifest all that unconsciously in me. That's why the kids in BLM are there. That's why the kids in Antifa are there. Why? Because imagine their family structure. When you look at somebody like Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, who went into the homes, the trailer parks in West Palm Beach, Florida, and they could lure young teenage girls away with alcohol, drugs, and money, take them away from their families. That's how broken the family unit was, that a stranger could come in, walk in one day and offer those three things and take your child away. That's the system that they create. And we have to do exactly the opposite. We have to love our children that much more. We have to love ourselves that much more. And we have to find that courage. That will give you the courage that everybody sees as a virtue. The courage to stand up in the face of these horrors and these terrors and these fears at the threat of even your own life in some cases, where you may be conscious of that fact or not. But that's what these acts of defiance give, is that self-love gives you the courage to stand up in face of anything. And that's all there in the Bible, and it's all throughout history that has occurred.
Amazing, amazing. And it's so true. Since I've been standing in that fear myself, I have found what you're both talking about, well, what you're talking about specifically, John, is creating, a vibrational reality. And I have now found, after doing this time and time again, which is, going places without a mask, which is saying why I don't, which is speaking the truth, that now I'm not a match to COVID. I'm not a match to COVID. I cannot, my body and my mind not live in the COVID world. People talk to me about it and I'm like, oh, okay, that's over there. I just, my whole, what do I want to use? What's the word I want? My whole being, my whole essence just rejects it. It's like, I'm not getting COVID because I can't. That's how I feel. I feel like when people say, oh, you need to do this and you need to do that, I just say, oh, okay, well, you don't really need to. You're choosing to. It's not really a law. It's just, highly recommended through the guise of a law, but that's your choice. But I mean, I feel energetically like I'm propulsed from it. Like it can't touch me. Gosh, I hope I don't get it after this. But seriously, I really mean that. I just don't live in that world. If I see it on TV, I have to go away from it. I just live my life. I breathe the air. I live my life. I see my family. I don't cause any problems for anyone. I stay 6 feet apart. I see my clients, and that's the world I live in. And it's kind of unusual for them, right? For my clients, they come in and they say, oh, you're not scared of this, or you're not wearing a mask. And I say, no, I'm not. I feel very protected. And also, if I get it, I'm sure I'll probably survive it. But I feel protected. I feel like vibrationally, I have moved away from it. Yeah. Quite frankly, when you talk about cults, John, it feels like a cult to me. It feels like the COVID cult. It has created its own program now that you have to subscribe to in fear. And
they sow these concepts. Yeah, the concepts of cults are not necessarily pronounced, but the psychological mechanisms of them are indoctrinated through all of us.
Absolutely.
And that's what, it's all based on limiting belief. So, you can have enormous ignorance and still think you're right. The one thing that I would say is that I said this to a friend of mine. This is the last comment I'll make about this, but we are going to, what may come out of this time, I hope, is when we look back on all that is unfolded before us, and as it happens in real time, that we realize the fragility of our human species, that the mind is a very powerful weapon and tool, but it can also be turned against us. And look at how it's been turned against us in our families, in society as a whole. And we have these fear rituals that are going out there that are having energetic impacts on people to where they're shutting down their lives. That the fear, the unconscious traumas, and these people are very smart. They make it so that you don't have a predictable future. You never had a predictable future to begin with. The future was always uncertain, but the illusion of it was that it would always just be the way it is. And so having that disrupted has ignited all of these unconscious traumas in people. And some of them are handling them well, and others are not handling them well.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say is, it ties into the fragility of humans, is that what kind of world would we live in if we began to view ourselves and each other as precious children of a creator of heaven and earth, all of us? And that would allow for us to see that my ignorant enemy over here is equal to me in this respect, and that they too have their own lived experience and their own suffering and their own crosses to bear. And what can I do, not to make them my ally necessarily, but what can I do to contribute, like you did at that store when you walked in without the mask, to ease the unnecessary suffering that they are going through? And when we begin to look at each other this way, we see that all of us in this world, this satanic world, however you want to identify it as, this confused world, this distracted world, this fractured world, how do we pick up all of those pieces and try to make them whole again? We have to begin to see each other in the opposite way that the world wants us. They want to go to a one world government with central control. We are a one body. We are one body in the divine. And if we take the evil, the marks of evil that have been laid down, the pillars of evil that have been laid down all throughout history and in this time, both physically and psychologically, there is an equal and opposite point in the light. And that's where we can catapult to a new time. We have to, the people who are awakened today need to go out and do and create that world, because many, many others like myself from before will have to go through more suffering before they finally break that courtship.
Yep. Okay, beautifully said. Great points there, John, for sure. Sacha, can you take us home?
I
Same
don't have
question.
a great. I've long since forgotten the question. You'll have to forgive me.
Okay,
But,
so the question is, how do we move forward? What would you say to people that we can do individually to affect the collective moving through this takeover of humanity?
Right. Yes. Thank you. I've just recalled what the pastor was saying. Rung very true to me. I would take it a great deal further and suggest that the exquisite art of irreverence must become the preserve of the new human. We have to learn the art of irreverence toward rogue authorities, toward the fiction of our lives, toward the corruption, and reserve the reverence to where it should be oriented, which is into the inner light and the sacrament of our true faith. But as it relates to dealing with the explicit reality, we are, as I said earlier, and I stand by it absolutely, and I don't use the word lightly, we are in the most systemic and endemically satanic and luciferic construct imaginable. Clearly, that's a fact. That's borne out in physics. We have spent thousands of years ideating, billions of souls manifesting, incarnating, ideating to this point. And here we are, when governments have weaponized against the people. The Catholic Church and the great monotheistic religious constructs have weaponized against the living souls. So that's a problem, a big, big problem, as John Paul elaborates on very beautifully. But until we learn that art of irreverence, We're certainly not going to be able to dissipate that. I mean, I loved the pastor's attitude about always remaining godly. Of course, you're a man of the cloth. You have to. I don't. I'm not a man of the cloth, and I'll be as irreverent as I choose. And I am irreverent by nature. But that's also because I've understood the rudiments of the satanic and Luciferic construct, and I'm absolutely fearless in that discovery, in the same way that you clearly both are. I referred to John Paul and the pastor. I'm not remotely afraid of any of it, because I see that it doesn't exist in and of itself, that it's only there by extension, again, of the abnegated and surrendered prana, life force, consciousness of us, as we've been the utility of the harvest of innocence for millennia. So irreverence must be the line in the sand where we stop complying, we stop obeying. We should not be paying any income taxes whatsoever. If you do, you are engaging in Satanism and Luciferianism. Luciferian in that it's false light worship. You're idolizing government, which by its own etymological meaning is mind control. That's what government, the word, means. Okay, we're that stupid that we allow the meme to insult us and ridicule us constantly. So government is the most diabolical construct imaginable. It is the Borg complex. It's the most real form of collectivism, and which is subjugation of supernature, of our true nature, of what we are as living beings and sons and daughters of God. So government depends and is sustained upon the abnegation of our divine nature.
Mm-hmm.
So it cannot exist if we're in our divine nature, in the same way that as the pastor took the rod to those imbeciles in costume, he's asking them to define their own metric. They couldn't do it. Well, they're too stupid to do it, to answer the question. But the truth of the matter is they would never be able to, even if they had 15 theological PhDs working for the police department, they wouldn't be able to understand what the pastor was referring to. He was referring to the ineffable, the indivisible. You're not going to define that with a statute or a code or an ordinance or a godless little piece of paper, which you quite rightly let fall to the floor, Pastor. I love that piece. And then we should have pressed on and prosecuted them for littering the streets. But the point is, it is the demarcation between the living and the dead. And irreverence is the way we're going to learn the craft and the skill and the art of redeeming ourselves from indentureship to thousands of years of idolatry, of iconoclasticism, of Luciferianism, and of Satanism. Because most good Christians and most good Hindus, most good Taoists, and most good Muslims today are practicing Luciferianism and Satanism without knowing it. They're indentured to it. They're shuffling along to the Super Bowls. They're shuffling along to rock and roll concerts. And they are abnegating, again, life force toward false light, iconoclasticism, and idolatry. They're getting addicted to themes that are being spun and memes that are being orchestrated by witches and warlocks. And as John Paul quite rightly points out, BLM and Antifa are classic cases in point of witchery playing out. I mean, we know who the founders of these organizations are, and they are abject Luciferians in their aspect.
Yep.
There's no joke there. They don't give a damn about it. They've just introduced this week the right to practice Satanism in school and to worship Satan. So that's where this incumbency in the corporation government, the administrative government of the United States, is taking us. So yes, it's desperately serious stuff. But I still say it is all perfect geometry as long as we understand and begin to learn the art of irreverence, non-compliance, civil disobedience. We shouldn't be citizens of any Caesars of Rome. And we are still, 2,000 years later, citizens of the state. Cronus. Cronus is the crown, the titan that devours its own young and also sodomizes them from time to time. So that's where we've arrived in the 21st century. I choose to say no contract. I do not comply. I do not obey. I have 5 words, and they are, get thee behind me, Satan. That's it.
Lovely, lovely. Well said, Sacha, as usual. So those are the 4 questions I have for you guys. I'll just open up the floor a little bit here for anybody who wants to make a final comment or ask each other anything before
Can I
we.
forgive me? I've got another interview. I'm literally jumping onto another screen that's waiting for me. So
Oh my
I've
goodness.
loved it.
Okay.
Absolutely loved meeting Pastor Henry. It was wonderful meeting you. And John Paul, looking forward to seeing you again. I think we have a rendezvous somewhere that needs to happen. Thank you.
Nice meeting you, Sacha.
God bless you. Bye.
Thanks, Sacha. Thank you. Bye-bye. So any final words before we end here, or we can just have a wrap?
I wanted to ask Father a question. In your estimation, with all, because your experience is vastly different from many, but where do you feel, and I share, let me say this, I share your embrace, because I remember this song when I had Catholic schooling upbringing, and before it was completely tainted, but they had a song in there that was reminded me, I am the church, you are the church, we are the church together. And so when I saw what you said to those officers, that struck a very real chord with me. Where do you see the institution of church moving in terms of its current, let's say, mainstream position to where it will go or where it needs to go?
So if I understand you correctly, my answer would be that let me see, how do I say this? Because of the crisis that we're going through right now, I feel like that church, or I don't even like to call it religion, it's a personal experience with God, and your experience and my experience when we're together, we're 2 children of God, and it's beautiful. I feel like that will be qualified, or will come out now again more than ever before. I feel like any religion out there that was dead will not revive, or cannot, there's nothing. If they've been closed since last March, there's no reason to exist. There's no reason to open up. There's nothing to open up to. I feel like that this is putting the pressure on that one more time, that every person will show what value is religion to them, or what value does the body. You mentioned that earlier. You said a number of things. I couldn't have agreed more with you. It was very, very well said. We are the body of Christ, and we have to function like a body. And if somebody thinks we can do without being a body, then maybe they don't know, they don't understand what the body is. But if you understand what the body is, I feel like it's going to define it again, like it has in years. It hasn't been. There was so much, what's it called, like just easygoing Sunday morning religion. But I feel like all of that will fall by the wayside, because the price will be high to pay for the real thing. You'll have to pay the price if you want the real thing. And there is people that will pay the price at any cost. They will pay the price. And actually, I think people will be joining. Many, I think, will be joining, because people have been so disillusioned with dead religion, so disillusioned with something that wasn't real, that when they see this passion, when they see this reality in us, in you and me, John, I feel like that people will just be drawn to it and say, what must I do? I want that.
Yes. It's an it's like an energetic spirit that is working through people. I mean, there's different ways to describe it. I try not to get too esoteric with people. I try to relate to them on a observable level, that they can, it's not so much looking down upon them, it's understanding that, yes, all of us are expressions of God, all of us are creations of God, and all of us have our own lived experiences, our own realities.
Yes.
And what Christ was talking about was, he's saying, no, go to them, Go to them and meet them at their level. Be with the poor.
That's it. Connect with them.
Connect with them. You need to connect with them. You can't sit there and just pray it all away and do
That's right.
good acts and good deeds for yourself that manifest bountiful things for yourself. It's wonderful. It's great. But it's like what am I supposed to do? It's doings.
That's it. That's
Human
it.
doings.
Yes, put feet to your prayers. You know, John, I had something very special, just real brief. I had something very, very special happening to me. I was speaking at one of the rallies in Toronto, and I was literally in a few minutes preaching my heart out, like passionately. A man came to me right after the rally. A man came to me, tall, low voice, spoke to me, and he said, "Pastor, I'm an atheist," but he said, "You are sure tempting me."
Wow.
That is monumental, because the atheists, most of them reject the deity and the institutional worship, rather than the fact that there may be a God, but I don't know, but it's not your God. That's basically their position.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I love that, because it's true that, and I see it in the awakening in the child in people, because the child, as I have experienced and witnessed this time in my own personal way, I'm not trying to convince anybody here of my way, but I have seen it in the child. The life, the spark of life that comes through in someone is that excited human that's arising again. And they can feel it in the being of yourself, not just what you're saying, but it's like what you're saying and what you feel is completely in agreement with each other, and that transfers energy to other people, and it starts to go, wait a minute, something's going on over here, I got to pay attention.
It's resonating, right?
Yeah. That's very beautiful.
It is very beautiful. Pastor Hildebrandt, do you have any final comments before we end?
Please pray for me.
You will be in my prayers for sure.
There's a lot before us. There's a lot before us, and I just so much desire that the Lord would help me to discern, as Sacha was saying, where should I be irreverent, and where must I be speaking with reverence? And sometimes it's just not easy. Like just this morning, just before I came onto this conversation here with you all, just minutes before that, I looked out the window and I saw there's the undercover police car sitting out there. Wow. And I'm wondering, okay, looking, is he coming to my door or my neighbor's door? And it happens that my neighbor is also a widow from my congregation, and she's not well in body. So I thought, why is he coming? So then as he knocks on the door, I open my door. The doors are real close. And I said, "Excuse me, officer." He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Was the agreement not that you were not going to knock on her door anymore? I understand that you have an agreement with her daughter, that you're going to meet with her daughter so as not to upset this lady because she's not in good health." Oh, he said, "I don't know. Do you know who they spoke to?" And I said, "Sir, I don't know." To me, it is, at that point, I feel like saying, "Sir, what would it take for you to learn and for you to listen?" But I didn't speak like that. But it just seems like, go check your records. You were told that you need to call the daughter and that she will meet with you, because I know the police want to bring this widow a ticket for attending church. Okay. But then agree on the time, be respectful, but it seems like it's hard. But anyway, that's my desire, is that you would pray for me. Lord would help me in my preaching, in my dealing with people. I want to be bold like a lion, but gentle as a lamb.
I think you're doing well. That. I think you're doing well. Love it. Paul, any final comments?
I just want to say thank you, Ella,
yes.
and for having the courage of your own convictions to bring people together and
yes.
try to find solutions to these very challenging times that can seem impossible.
Yeah.
And really all is possible when we relax into the true essence of who and what we are, and I was saying this earlier, as ignorant as we can. You know, in spite of all of our unknowings of things. So for example, you know, I dove into human trafficking of children. I don't recommend that as an activity that one participates in, for the reason that it can cause major disturbances. It can even bring up unconscious traumas from childhood, for which I went through as a result of this. And what I tell people is to focus on what is true and what is good, because those are the foundations that have endured tyranny throughout all of history. Soviet Union, Stalin, we have no concept of the hell that went on at that time, where, a trusted, loyal servant of Stalin, all of a sudden he just ordered them to be killed immediately because of his suspicion and his paranoia, or to make an example out of him. These are people who sacrificed for him and were murdered on a whim because of his terror and his fear and his machine. And here's the crux of it, though. If you were to go back, and you can do this through Alice Miller's work, at least with Hitler, you will see child abuse committed against Hitler as a child by his father and his mother every single day of his life. He beat his son every single day of his life, such to the point he almost died a couple of times. When he was an artist and he was painting, his grandmother told him that his artwork was shit and that he would never amount to anything. What had happened to these people was that they had a very unique experience in childhood, but that their suffering and pain became their identity, and their psychopathy took over, and it summoned that collective child abuse energy out into the public. Most people don't know that Bavarian child rearing in the 19th century had a 60 to 70% mortality rate, primarily because the mother and father could do things to their child when they were born that we would throw people in jail for life today. That means that they could beat and club and kill their child on a whim. That means that all of the child rearing that was experienced 200 and 100 years ago was less than what we would accept today on minimum standards for anybody, let alone our own children. So I guess my point in mentioning this is that these unconscious traumas that exist within each of us can be faced down, but I would argue, rather than going into the darkness of the world, for which it will pull at you into it, even if you, and I was mentioning this earlier, going up against it and fighting it. And when I talked about Antifa and BLM being ultimate contradictions to the justice and righteousness that they are seeking, because they destroyed $2 billion worth of property in the United States alone last year to get their message out. Granted, all of that was paid for and financed, and we know all that, but it took true believers to go in there and do it. And if we're to create a different world, we must learn the lessons of this time, what created it, how we got here, more importantly, our position in relation to all of it, and the work that we need to do on ourselves. That is, to me, the ultimate expression that we can act in defiance of our past, but that we live as close as we can to in the present, and by doing so, we create that future that everybody wants, rather than to wait on someone to come in like a Trump or somebody else. It doesn't matter. I'm not putting this on Trump because so many people are divided by it. I'm just talking about those who sought a savior in Trump. And now look at where we're at, and we're having to deal with that. And so it's one illusion after the other, after the other that we will seek until we face reality.
Yeah. Wow, beautifully said. I want to thank both of you so much, and Sacha too, who had to leave, for really leading the way at this time. It's like gold. I mean, there's nothing that I can say that could be enough for what both of you are doing and Sacha is doing tirelessly, repeating these messages and really helping people to wake up and really helping people to see what's in front of them. And as both of you have said, to reformulate the relationship with the divine and with God. And we do see that happening, and that is beautiful. So thank you for your courage. Thank you for your tenacity. Thank you for your defiance and knowing when to defy and when not to defy. Or yes, when to defy gently and when to defy more harshly. Thank you so much. It's been just a great show. Just such a great wealth of information and great points of view. So thank you so much. Maybe we'll do this again. I hope we do. This was fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Thank you so much for having us.
you're
Thank you,
welcome.
Pastor. I appreciate you too.
Thanks, John, and thank you for your support and your prayers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.